Hey all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming today, and as always, we're going to be talking about Harlequins, specifically how we're shaping up in Pariah Nexus with the new data slate. Now, there is a lot to go over, so let's get into it. In this video, we're going to be talking about how the new battle line rules affect us, how secondaries have changed our game plan a little bit, what we can do with tank shock, how to best utilize our Star Weavers and why Phantasm is relevant again, how we're going to best utilize our Falcons, what we can do with some of our models and the benefits to having those 25mm base sizes, and we're going to also go over some of the new unit buffs and nerfs at the end. Now, our Harlequin troop gained a ton in this edition and really fill almost all of our roles. Being battle line, it allows them to action pretty regularly with a lot of the mission bonuses. We can get things like raise banners, or we can advance in action, or we can action and shoot. All of these are supremely beneficial to us, especially because we're using Harlequin troop anyway. Would I go out of my way to add a bunch of battle line units in a typical army? Probably not, but since we already have them, we might as well utilize it. Beyond this, our Harlequins are going to be doing a lot of damage. They're going to be able to move block much more effectively, and that 8-inch move allows them to action on turn 1 without advancing, even without mission special rules. Again, this 8-inch move changes everything. When we get into the terrain layouts and how it all looks, most of them are 7 to 8 inches away from deployment zone, while a lot of other armies, unless they have scouts, will have to advance and do actions in the following turn or use more mobile units to complete actions. We can just use our basic troops. Now, when we start looking into the new terrain layouts, our movement tricks become more and more substantial and relevant. One of the things you're going to see pretty regularly is the disembark and re-embark into Star Weavers behind a lot of these walls. On quite a few pieces of terrain or terrain layouts themselves, you will see these large runes lined on the edge of the board. What we did in this game, we played this yesterday. It was a game against Blood Angels. I'll post that video soon as well. But we ended up just moving our Star Weaver up to this wall, blocking our opponent from being able to charge through it with typical troops. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult coming out around here. Picked up a couple of things from some guys who know some stuff a little bit more than me as well. But when we put it down on the table, it made a lot of sense. So what we did is we moved our Star Weaver up. We get our troops out 3 inches. We hose a unit of scouts. Then we hop back in afterwards. Very nice trick. Beyond this are lone ops, and a lot of the shooting and firing angles that we're going to see on these boards have very, very long and tight firing lanes. Something like a Death Jester on this corner can fire all the way down into this area towards our opponent's deployment zone. We can also shoot from this wall that we're blocking straight down to where our opponents may be blocking us on the following turn. But all we need is that 1-inch phantasm a lot of times to bring us into safety. Now, beyond this, being able to shoot our guys up or beyond the walls, which is where I really truly feel a lot of the combat is going to take place, is going to mean everything. Being able to come out, fight a unit, phantasm the following turn, block them from getting attacked in return is pretty incredible. And it's one of the reasons I believe Warp Spiders went up another 10 points per unit, while Shadow Specters went up, while Scourges went up. This terrain layout in a lot of these formats really lends to that fire and fade ability, and it gives us a huge advantage. So having a bunch of Star Weavers on the board really does a lot for us. Now, we also have very, very small base sizes. We have those 25mm bases, which means if our opponent is trying to block us from this wall, if they're touching it, we can typically engage them from the other side of the wall. If they're an inch back, our bases still fit within that to get the charge. But likewise, on the other side of the table, if our opponents are on something like a 32mm base and we position 1.1 inches away on this section of the wall, they cannot charge through because they cannot fit their base size. They're forced to move around. So having something like 25, 30, 35, 25mm bases in our army allows us to dictate the terms of engagement a whole bunch better. Now our vehicles ended up getting a pretty solid glow up as well. We generally didn't have a whole bunch of issues with our Star Weavers and our Falcons getting their movement impeded because we had that fly keyword, but Tank Shock is very relevant now on a toughness 6 vehicle. If we want to go in and get those extra couple wounds to finish off a unit or a vehicle, we can absolutely do that. In a lot of cases, it's just like being able to throw grenades twice. Very, very often we are throwing grenades at a unit, we're shooting fusion pistols, we're charging with the Harlequin troop, and then we're also charging with the Star Weaver so that we can get back in combat afterwards. Having a relevant tank shock allows us to get a couple extra wounds through, so not bad at all. Now, in this layout, as far as the terrain itself, there are a lot of small firing lanes that our Star Weavers or Vipers possibly could get into, and it allows them to move block our opponent's bigger units much more efficiently. There are a lot of tight windows. Could be difficult to navigate something like Land Raiders or Repulsors. Even Rhinos and Impulsors themselves are pretty big when trying to get through some portions of the terrain on these new maps. So us being able to just shove one of those for 80 points into their line and buying us an extra turn could do a whole bunch for us. Now, because we typically adopt a more ambush style of fighting with the Harlequins, the secondaries lend themselves to us very well. There are only 7 secondaries that require killing, but 11 of them are action-based or just involve us standing on objectives. We played this last game. I got 3 objective secondaries that involved me having to kill something off an objective or one of my opponent's units. I believe it was Assassinate, Call the Horde, and Overwhelming Force. My opponent only got 3 as well. So no longer do we need to spread out our forces into really inconvenient positions. There's no capture enemy outpost. There's no investigate signals. There's no tempting target. Nothing to pull us into precarious situations that can cause us to really just steamroll a game away. It allows us to just play the typical safe game that we want to play until our opponents get into range and we can just pounce all at once. It was very, very easy piling on secondaries. Now, the game that we ended up playing had raised banners as the mission rule, and I ended up scoring an additional 5 secondary points. We're using 6 in that list, and it ended up being pretty impactful. So the new tournament terrain layouts and secondaries, I truly believe, will be the most beneficial for us as Harlequins. No, we did not get a glow up in a lot of our data sheets. We actually got some points increases. But on the whole, I think this lends a little bit more to us as a faction. 16 missions could be played on map 1. 12 can be played on map 2. Those were both used in the Leviathan GT pack. Now, beyond this, what we're going to see more than anything else is map layout 4 and map layout 8. So we're going to be right here, which is very, very similar to terrain layout 1 and 2, and then terrain layout 8, which is a little bit different. Typically, we're going to be playing on Tipping Point, Crucible of Battle, Search and Destroy, and Hammer and Anvil. That's the vast majority of the tournament companion. So Hammer and Anvil are these up and down, just all the way across the board. I believe we start 18 inches out. It might be 20 now. One of them changed. Crucible of Battle is just this diagonal shape. This is my absolute favorite. Tipping Point is very, very similar, but it's that puzzle piece halfway up the board. You start off, I believe, 20 inches, and then you go back to 12 inches afterwards. And then we have Search and Destroy, which is that typical quarters style deployment. Most of these maps will utilize one of those. So there is a ton of benefit for us and Star Weavers and to utilize our movement tricks almost everywhere. As you can see, these large terrain pieces, these are essentially just going to be stalemate positions of the board for our opponent. And if you're utilizing other armies, especially with the bigger base sizes. For us, this is not an issue. We get to engage wherever we want to. There are a lot of long sight lines and firing angles. Again, in terrain layout 8. This is a new one, so I wanted to go over this here. We can go all the way across the board here. We can position guys out from this side of the rune after deployment, and we can get angles all the way here. Our troops or whoever it is, if we had lone ops, something like a death jester, can pop out here right in the middle, and we have firing lanes all the way down here as well. Or we could just move ourselves into the center section of the board. But you can see when it comes to something like move blocking, our Star Weavers can just run rampant. Our basic troops can run rampant. There is not much space to move things like Impulsors or Rhinos or Land Raiders. We can essentially force our opponent, if they're using a lot of big vehicles, to stage in this big section of the board. On terrain layout 4, there's this huge area in the midfield that we get to take advantage of. This is where Phantasm's going to be very nice. We're getting back into the Star Weavers is going to be pretty good. Just allow us to engage and then disengage in the same turn pretty regularly. So I do feel like the terrain is going to be a huge boost to us on top of the secondaries. It's just about how we best utilize it on the board. I wish I had more specific tips for you, but I just don't have enough games into it just yet. Now, we didn't have any rules changes or datasheet changes, but we did have quite a few points increases. Your Vrain went up 25 points, and being as realistic as I can be, it doesn't make a difference. We're still taking her, we're still taking the Vizark, and we're still taking a big brick of Harlequin troops. Yes, you could play the Incarn, you can play the Avatar, but on a lot of these maps, I like being able to section off an objective or block a wall, and I also like being able to heroically intervene for 1 CP with a fights first unit now. And we're going to see a little bit of that in the Blood Angels game. So I do believe that your Vrain right now is a must take in Harlequins, but to each their own. I played with some very, very good success without Yvrain, without avatars, with just D cannons and everything else. Unfortunately, we are gonna have to move away from the D cannons as it stands right now. Hitting on 4s, even with the rerolls, makes it a little too swingy, especially at their cost at 135 points. Maybe if they drop down to 120 or even 125 again, it would make sense to fit them in the list. But where it stands now, it just makes for some really awkward list building anyway, and adding that unreliability that comes with them just doesn't seem worth it at this point. But we are still taking your Vrain. Now, the Skyweavers did end up going up 10 points from 95 to 105, and really, it doesn't matter. If we're playing Harlequins, we have to use the Skyweavers anyway. It's one of my favorite models. Do I think they're the greatest unit out there? No, but do I think they're one of the most reliable at destroying tanks and finishing off hard, difficult targets? Absolutely. Into marine profiles, they have been shockingly good. Now, while we're wounding on 5s and shooting, it is still damage 3. If we roll a 6, we're still bringing down something like Chosen or Blade Guard veterans, which I believe are going to show up a lot more. We're also bringing down Terminators or, 8 pounds. So there's a lot of added benefit to having Skyweavers. The 10-point increase isn't going to matter that much. Now, the Void Weaver ended up coming down from 125 points to 115, but more interesting to me is the Vipers coming down from 80 to 75. That's a 40-point difference between the Viper and the Void Weaver, and I honestly think it's a better option in one of our armies. I don't say this because I believe it's better on the whole, but do I think it's the Void Weaver is 40 points better than the Viper? No. And the way this is playing out in list construction is I generally will have 75 to 80 points left over after I include all of the units that I want and I need in the army to function appropriately. Fitting in something like a Void Weaver means I'm cutting something else relevant a lot of the times, just to kind of squeeze in a unit that I'm not super happy with anyway. But the Viper slots in just perfect. Now, we are still getting a good amount of anti-vehicle damage. It still gives us a place to throw our fate dice if we do end up getting that hit. But something a little bit overseen is we run a lot of shuriken cannons, and being able to have something to turn off the benefits of cover on one of our opponent's big units really ups the damage output on a lot of our other units. So no, we aren't, getting 6 more shuriken cannon shots like we would with a Void Weaver, but we are enabling the rest of our shooting to do a little bit more. So for 40 points less, a small platform that is not irrelevant to kill, it requires some amount of commitment to get rid of, really seems intriguing. So I ended up running one in the last game, and I was very, very happy with it. I haven't run a Viper almost all of 10th edition, and it was surprisingly decent. So overall, I think we are in a far better place than we were in the Leviathan GT setting. We combine everything: terrain, our movement shenanigans, how the secondaries now align with our playstyle, with things like the added benefit of tank shock and 1 CP heroic intervention with fights first units. I think we are coming out far on top of where we were in Leviathan. Now, are Harlequins going to be the absolute top army right now? No. But are we going to be able to be that much more competitive? Absolutely. Utilizing the same lists and strategies we have the entire time. So I hope this helps. I hope you enjoyed. I look forward to hearing about everyone's games. And really, I can't wait to get a few more battle reports on the table. Our next video is actually going to be the outcome of a best of 3 against Blood Angels. Now, there was a mistake made, and we're just going to use it as a teaching experience, but it should be pretty exciting. The first 2 games were done using Leviathan on layout 1 or 2. And the last game is on Pariah Nexus with the new missions, and it was really and truly eye-opening. So I'll get that posted over the next few days. I appreciate you. Please like, share, subscribe. Any little bit of help means more than you can possibly imagine. Thanks again.